I hereby call this meeting, the Norwood City Council, to order. Please rise for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. We will have 60 seconds of silence this evening. Thank you. Now for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Gears, please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Here.
Mrs. Hoover.
Here.
Ms. Royce.
Here.
Mr. Kelsch.
Here.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Here. Mr. Braden.
Here.
All members present. Move on to amendment of the agenda. We have two items this evening. On item L3, on section 2, the highlighted portion, as you will notice, is now out of Fund 5050-0853-57297 lead water service line replacement. That is the ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to accept an H2 Ohio drinking water grant from the Ohio Environment Protection Agency and not to exceed $348,000 to replace consumer side lead water service lines along the Regent Avenue Board construction project within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Then L5, we are adding an ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract with Neptune Equipment Company as lowest and best bidder for the Norwood water meter replacement and integration project, including remote read and data collection software and hardware, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that we amend the agenda as stated.
Motion by Mr. Braden. Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelsch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Moving on to item F, minutes of previous meeting, February 8th, 2022. Mr. Thompson.
Move we receive and file the meeting or the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to receive and file the minutes. Mr. Kelch.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelsch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item H, request to address council. Chief McCabe. Chief McCabe is asked to speak to council.
Good evening. First, congratulations to the new members that decided to volunteer, because you're really volunteering your time, you're not going to be getting paid that much, but to serve in the community. So thank you. It's a thankless job, and maybe first to say thanks. And also, please feel free to stop by the firehouse. That's the community's firehouse. We always are happy to show you around and give you the 50-cent tour. So the real reason I'm here is to thank the administration, and the previous council, as we're getting ready to put our new fire truck in service. Some of you got to see it parked outside. It's a significant investment. But one might say, well, it's a $650,000 and change investment in public safety. But in the long term, that truck will serve us for 25 years. So what you're really looking at in today's dollars is about $35,000 a year, including maintenance and upkeep, for 25 years sitting there. So it's really a decent investment that will protect the homes and provide EMS service as well to the citizens and visitors of the city. It takes a lot of planning. What you might not know is the council, this is actually Mayor Schneider's first year in office. It was a council of 20 and 21. It was their first major foray once the FRP was done. So it was a significant discussion, a lot of money that was going to be spent in a time where there was some fiscal uncertainty, but we got our heads together and were able to get it done, and the fruit of that labor will be going in service as a fire truck in the station tomorrow. So just want to give you guys a heads up that investment will be serving the citizens starting tomorrow. Everyone have a great night. Any questions?
Mr. Brady?
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. McKay, congratulations on your fire truck. So I know that we bought a ladder truck also.
Sure.
Last year, I guess?
I was actually in 20 as well.
2 years ago, okay.
Yeah.
So now we got a ladder truck. Now we got a brand new fire truck. What other vehicle do we have? We got 3 trucks now?
Well, so the fire department runs 2 engine companies, which are the pumpers, and 1 ladder truck. And what we've been without is a spare. And so I'm going to date myself a little bit. The first truck that was brand new when I started the fire department is getting rolled back into reserve status, and that was a 2000. So that has about 3 more years left before it needs to be replaced. Capital spending takes a lot of planning in terms of really looking at needs, looking at funding, trying to forecast those needs. You probably won't see it. Finance may see it. The fire department provides an 8-page needs document. I know it goes to my boss. It says, it's a running total of, hey, this is what we've needed, what's been accomplished, what we foresee in the future. When we do our budget summaries, we try to do a 9-year capital plan that outlays, hey, these are the things that are coming up. And public safety, whether police or fire, is expensive. That's tough, right? But we try to be real active in terms of these are what the expenditures look like. I'm always happy to sit in front of finance and justify those needs, not necessarily wants. And really give a good perspective in terms of what the city is looking at from a capital outlay. I think the 5-year plan is really, really well done for the city in terms of, hey, this is what we're looking at overall as a city. We try to just take that out a little further because it really, I know from a standpoint of the cost, what that could look like, and to provide those numbers, extend it out past the typical 5-year, I think serves us well from the fire department standpoint. Say, hey, these are things we're going to need, so let's be aggressive and plan towards that.
I appreciate that. So, yeah, I was here for that, and I just want to congratulate you. I'll congratulate the fire department and the citizens of Norwood. So it's a pretty truck.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to go ahead and say, too, I'm glad we were able to get that done for the firefighters and the city. That was something we spent some time talking about, so it's kind of nice to see it out there. And the way you broke it down, the price-wise per year, it sounds like the cheapest but most valuable employee of the fire department, so.
Certainly.
Hopefully many decades left on it, so.
Yeah, we always anticipate about 25 years, and that's a worthwhile investment for sure.
Anyone else? Mrs. Franson?
Now, you called it a 50-cent tour, but I say it was at least $2 or $3 worth for my money.
Well, we were glad to have you. Thank you.
But yeah, I was really glad to see the trucks and hear about your needs when I went over there. So thanks for breaking it down so well for me and for everyone. And I'm really glad that the previous council was able to do good work for you guys. And hopefully that we can continue that.
Thank you, Mrs. Franzen. Anyone else? Thank you, Chief McCabe.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have a request this evening from Bishop Sonny James.
Good evening, all of Norwoodians, family, and friends. First, my heart still goes out to all of the families that still struggle with that horrendous pandemic. It is not over yet. We've personally had 4 deaths recently in the family, and now my mother-in-law just got her 3rd report back, so for the 3rd week in a row, is still struggling with COVID. So we pray safety and health for all of those that are stricken by this pandemic. I'm excited about tonight because I get to stand before you all and talk about Black History Month. I'm really excited, but before I do that, I just want to echo our fire chief. I love it when I can actually brag on my peers. What a good man. You know, some things come down to it's not about race, it's not about the color of your skin. It's really about the code of ethics that you operate by. And every time that I see that man, even if we're on the street where there's tragedy going on, he takes the time to say hello. And you'd be surprised how awesome and what a difference just a hello can make. So I want to say to all of our awesome Norwoodians, hello, and that we are all on the same page. Now, this coming Sunday, we get to celebrate our 2nd annual Black History Month parade. And I want to let everyone know that every person in Norwood is more than welcome, more than invited. Last year was our first one after our Martin Luther King march that we did, and the parade was absolutely phenomenal. And I believe Mrs. Hoover participated with us. As always, Mr. Kelch is always behind the scenes giving his support. Whether he's able to make it or not, he's made some. But I want you all to know that you personally are invited to come out and show unity, to show togetherness, because, you know, the only way we're going to change how people see our past is to launch our future. And that has got to be together. That has got to be where we just, you know, forget about a lot of things. I, for one, as painful as it may be, but we've got to get to a point where we can say hello to each other. We've got to get to a point where, you know, when you see someone who doesn't, or you perceive that they don't like you, that you can still at least say hello. And there are some of you in this room right now that if your family came to you and said, well, when's the last time you said hello to Bishop James? You'd probably have to say, oh, I haven't, or I go out of my way not to say hello. Folks, let's put all of that behind us. Let us be the launching pad for other communities to look at and to say, my God, man, they couldn't stand each other. But look what they have done together. That we can teach our children of tomorrow. That tomorrow is whatever we will make it to be. And I want to stand with you, not separate. You know, a couple of years ago, I shared that I had intervened with the drive-by shooting. And it was funny because the leadership asked me one day, well, what did you expect us to say? I was like, thank you. You know, and then here now as we see our community, unfortunately, being plagued with just senseless, violent acts against perhaps totally innocent families. And I imagine right now, if that family could have had somebody to intervene, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have had to be told what to say. They probably would say thank you. So let's just really begin to celebrate. Let's get involved with more African-American-led initiatives. Let's begin, if our population now is 12% black, let us from the state level down begin to petition one another to challenge, to make sure that our economic inclusion protocols include 12% participation. And so when you see me the rest of this year, that's what you will be hearing from me. Now, racial equity, but really economic inclusion. 12%. if we're 12% of the population, then we need 12% in the fire department, 12% in the police department, and 12% in every aspect. God bless you all, and let's keep praying one for another. God bless you.
Thank you, Bishop James.
Excuse me, Ken?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, Bishop,
Oh,
can
it's
you
okay.
give the day and time for the
This Sunday, the 27th of February, it will begin at 2 o'clock. And if I can, this is not a march. This is a celebration parade. If you all remember last year this time, there was horrific racial attack on the campus of Xavier. And so our peers have gotten together, and this is our second year, to really stamp out that nasty ugliness against any color, against any group. So it'll be Sunday, we'll start at 2 o'clock, we'll end at 4, and then I'm actually going to participate in their mass following the parade. And everyone is invited. I don't care who you are, children, anybody. And it's going to be safe, family-friendly.
parade? And Bishop, it will be starting at the Family Dollar.
At the Family Dollar on Montgomery Road. And don't worry, police, last year we didn't have one incident. We know how the sidewalks need to be utilized, and so we're very seasoned at what we do. And so none of our events have any episodes, and neither will this one.
Thank you, Bishop James. Moving on to reports of standing committees of council. I-1, Economic Development, February 7th, 2022. Mrs. Winbauer.
Yes. Let me get my, yeah. So we had, we reviewed 2 CRA applications. One was from the 1027 group. They bought the property at 4539 Montgomery Road. So that property has 4 apartment units and 2 commercial spaces. Since it's greater than 3 units, they were able to do the CRA application. So we were just discussing the renovations that they needed and also what their price range for the apartments would be rent-wise per month. They currently they have, I think, 2 renters that they asked to be out by March 15th. One of them is a government-assisted program. They will not utilize those apartments for government-assisted programs in the future. We did discuss kind of future, being aware of that when we want to change over properties, making sure we still maintain affordable housing. But they seem to have a good plan, and the committee definitely recommends to approve the CRA from the 1027 group. The next group, we heard from Joe Claire at Norwood Cider. So they bought the property at 2075 Mills, and they want to put in a cidery there. They have a great plan for employees. So anywhere from 12 to 25 positions possible, part-time, full-time. They really want to hire within the community, which was nice to hear. And definitely had some good plans there. And we also recommend that council approves their CRA. That's all I have.
That's all you have? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Winbauer. Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I make a motion to approve the minutes, I just want to make a notation that my name is spelled wrong on page 2 of this document. I have an H in my name.
Sorry. My fault.
Just to let you know. Probably won't do that again.
No, I'll get it right next time.
That's it. But then, after the correction, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes. Also, I have a question. I guess we have them in front of us, but a summary's fine, but do we normally read them word for word? I guess it doesn't really matter. We have them in front of us. Motion to approve the minutes as written.
So you're making a motion to approve the
Yes.
minutes, right?
And
Okay.
accept the report.
And accept the report?
Accept committee report.
Accept the report.
Thank you.
Okay. So motion by Mr. Brady to accept the committee report. Have a second? Mr.
I'll second.
Thompson. Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. We move on to I-2, Infrastructure, February 8th, 2022. Mrs. Franzen.
All right. So we met a couple weeks ago just to kind of get an update on upcoming infrastructure improvements in the city. We heard from both Clint Zimmerman and Noah Powers. So Clint updated us on the water system. We are, we're going to be hypothetically approving the ordinance to have the water meter replacement and have wireless meter reading, which would be nice. We also suggest that we approve the ordinance to allow the Safety Service Director to accept an H2O Ohio drinking water grant. That is a bad name for speaking out loud. Because that is going to allow residents of Regent Avenue to replace any lead service lines from the curb to their house free of charge to them. So that needs to be passed expeditiously. So a lot of good stuff going on with the water system. Another really big thing is that the water towers will be coming offline. We have enough backup water from the city of Cincinnati. The EPA signed off of it a couple months ago. So that's really big news if you, like me, had heard about the water towers for several years. Let's see, what other things that are really good? I mean, a lot of good stuff is going on, obviously. The other big thing that is currently in progress is the Safety Service Director is putting together an ADA accessibility plan, which hopefully in about a month we'll be able to pass a resolution recognizing that it's meant to be a living document. So it's not going to be like, we're definitely going to do all these things at this time and this time and this time. It's meant to be a list of things that need to be updated to be in ADA compliance. This is something that is federally required and has been for some time, but most cities haven't had a plan until very recently. So we're actually not behind the curve on this. We're kind of on the crest of the curve, so to speak. So once we have this document, we'll be able to be in compliance with federal regulations and have a good idea of how much we need to do to make stuff from having the elevator in the rec center operational to just having proper curb cuts in all of our sidewalks. So that is a big thing that Mr. Powers is taking on, which is really great, I think. Anything else with infrastructure? Sorry, I have two committee reports thrown right after another, so they're bleeding together. I think that's it. Anything else that was not covered is in the minutes.
And I should have said this to you, Mrs. Winterbauer, but typically you just say respectfully submitted and give your name as chairperson and then the people's names that are on the committee with you so that everyone knows who's on that committee.
Oh, okay.
So if you would add that for me.
Absolutely. Yes, sorry about that. So we met with, who was on that committee? I know committees. It was myself as chairperson, and we had Mr. Kelch, Ms. Alexis Royce, and Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
Thank you for the correction.
May I have a motion to receive?
Motion to receive the minutes as written.
Receive and accept as.
Receive and accept the minutes. Committee report.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Need a Post-it note.
Second. So we have a motion by Mrs. Hoover, second by Mr. Kelch. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yep.
All members present, voting aye. Motion passes. We'll move on to item I3, Parks, Recreation, and Public Places, February 9th, 2022. Mrs. Franzen.
All right, so I was the chairperson, and Mr. Kelch, Ms. Winterbauer, and Ms. Hoover were there as well for the Parks Committee. We got an update from Darren Hackworth and Michael Gabbard on the states of the Parks and Rec Department. Mr. Gabbard updated us on the rec center and all the rooms that are available to rent, and Mr. Hackworth updated us on some of the upcoming park renovations. And we also hope to have a grand reopening of Hunter Park once we get all of the last bits of accoutrements, benches, et cetera, installed there. So we are going to keep in contact with them and figure out when that is going to happen, once the weather clears up here in hopefully a month or two. We also received the Parks Audit that had taken place last year, and I took the opportunity to get Rosie Santos, who helped with the report, get her information from Donna Lake, and met with Ms. Santos to get some ideas on where we should go next with this park audit. So my hope is I'll hear back from her soon, and we can get going on kind of making a plan for the parks, getting the capital improvements list together, and moving forward with that, with input from the community, because I certainly do not want to do it all myself. I mean, I really don't want to. I don't have all the information. So I'm hoping to get more input from the community as well as this Parks Audit to help out with that. So that is it.
Okay. You want to read that last little portion down there for me?
Respectfully.
I respectfully submit this.
Thank you, Mrs. Franzen. May I have a motion to accept the committee report? Mrs. Winterbauer?
Motion to accept minutes as written?
Mr. Kelch?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. So it doesn't matter to me, but I just can't help but notice that our I don't know if we were, if maybe we're coached a little differently this term, but normally, and it doesn't matter to me, but I just want to make sure to clarify, and maybe you spoke to someone else, but normally we have a committee report here, and we, like Mr. President mentioned, we have the honorable council, we normally recite, what's on the committee report, and then we actually read the committee report, and then we, respectfully submitted, and all the members that are attendance that day. So did someone inform us that we're just giving briefs now, or maybe we're keeping 2 good minutes? We don't want to read them all? I'm just curious if we have been coached on not actually reading the committee report now and just giving briefs, or if that's something that we just are doing tonight.
That would have been a legal question, not something we coach.
Just generally, we recite the committee report, and then we actually read our committee report, and then we, respectfully submit, and that's just generally been how we do it. I'm just curious if
I
that's
understand.
changed now.
Mr. Moore, I think we're just trying to get into the cadence of.
Okay.
Of the report.
Just a question.
I don't think it legally makes any difference if the committee report, if everything is presented to the council members and council votes to accept the committee report. I think that's fine. I don't think it has to be read. We did this 2 years ago. The first couple were, and just kind of off the top of the chairperson's head. And then instead of reading it, but the reading it, I think that's been the tradition, but they've also been shorter. They haven't been minutes. If there have been minutes, they have been separate from the actual report, and the report would be on the CRAs, met with, to the Honorable Council, City of Norwood, your Committee on Economic Development, to who was submitted CRA for 1027, respectfully reports that we met with the committee, we met with the representatives of 1027, the committee recommends council approve the agreement, respectfully submitted, and then for those that kept minutes, did it the right way, they would then have a separate minutes that were filed somewhere. This is fine, and I think that actually reading it depends on what the minutes are, but I mean, it would be entirely, I think it's entirely up to council as long as everything's a part of it.
Can I respond? Quickly, yeah. So, yeah, I don't have any issues at all. I think the only thing that comes to mind would be that if someone don't have their packet and we are actually voting on a committee report, and now we're voting on a summary or the report. So that's the only thing that comes to mind, that we are actually no, we're not. We're voting to submit a report. So we submit the summary or we submit the report, I guess. That's the only thing that comes to mind. So maybe we're better reading it unless it's too long. I understand that.
Mr. Chairman, if I just...
Yes, Mr. Moore.
A recommendation is if the committee report would be the form, which is a very brief form, and say, very quick summary of what the committee did, and then minutes attached, respectfully submitted. That might be the easier way to do it, because it's part of it is capturing what happened in the committee, and part of it is the minutes, and nobody wants, I mean, I can't imagine, a 2-hour finance committee meeting that anybody wants to read the minutes from that.
I understand. Okay.
Thank you.
I
Just
got
my
you.
suggestion.
That makes sense.
Thank you. Mrs. Swanbauer.
I understand where you're coming from time-wise. I think too, but I just think of the people watching, if we just do like a quick recap for anything important that they might want to say, hey, I want to check out this committee meeting, so I don't know if that's beneficial. Some things might need it, some things might not.
Mr. Moore?
Just the way it has, I think, traditionally been done is like, oh, here's the committee report, it's brief to the point, okay, the finance committee recommends we approve, the council passed the appropriations ordinance, all 3 readings, we're in a big hurry. And then there's a motion to accept it, and then discussion, at that point, the chair will say, and one of the things we talked about was, and then go into the discussion of what it was. It's kind of the way the flow was,
Got it.
at least when I started, and then while I was on council.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Kelch.
Thank you, Mr. President. So typically where it's the beg leave, submit the following report, that's where the recap would be. So you would read that, and then you would recap what it is. And then Mr. Bernardo used to do a lot where he'd attach extra, and he'd write see attached on the bottom. I think it's just for process purposes and professionality, I think it just plays better. Personally, like what Mr. Come drawing a blank.
Braden?
What he said earlier was, the second thing he said was, that was very,
I do that to
very
people.
close to what it was. Mr. Moore. But I just think have it that way, we give a brief summary, and then the minutes are attached to it. I think that just goes a lot smoother. And I just want to say, because I was hammered on it first couple times last year, or last term, so, and I had to kind of get in the groove with how it went myself, so.
Did I see your hand, Mr. Thompson?
Oh, sure, I'll make a quick comment. I think most people covered, but I think this is probably just in an effort to make sure we're doing good minutes, which hasn't necessarily happened in the past. Most of the time, it was just a handwritten report. So I think that's right. Just your report is a brief, attach some minutes. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about after you submit the report.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Francis.
I just want to say thank you for input, Mr. Braden, on that, because it was definitely something I wasn't really sure about. So I'm
Absolutely.
glad we had this discussion to get kind of a little more clarity on that. Since
I think
it's
you
our
did a great
first-
job. Great job. No
Yeah, I just don't want to.
issues at all.
I just don't want to get us in trouble.
It's all good. Thank you, Mrs. Francis.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mrs. Hoover.
So for clarity, because I'm up next, just read it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, thank you, sir.
So the motion on the floor by Mrs. Winterbauer and seconded by Mr. Kelch is to accept the committee report that Mrs. Franzen just submitted. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover,
Yes.
Ms. Royce,
Yes.
Mr. Kelch,
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden. Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. We'll move on to item I4, Law and Ordinance, February 15th, 2022. Mrs. Hoover.
Awesome, thank you. So, to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Law, Ordinance, and Human Resources, to whom was referred ordinance number 351.14, the 16-hour parking restriction, item number, or ordinance number 505.071, cruelty to companion animals, and the Council Rules of Committee, item 6, fees for requesting notice. Beg leave to submit the following report. There is a discussion regarding the 16-hour parking restriction with a recommendation from the committee to change to 72 hours. There was a discussion regarding the cruelty to companion animals ordinance with a decision to have ongoing discussions with the Hamilton County Dog Warden, Norwood Police Department, Law Department, and residents. And a discussion regarding the rules of committee with a recommendation to remove the wording of reasonable fees. And there are attached minutes. Respectfully submitted by Susan Hoover, the chairperson. Also attending was Mr. Eric Thompson and Ms. Alexis Royce. Mr. Kelch was unable to join us that evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Mr. Thompson.
Move we accept the report.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to accept the report. May I have a second?
I'll
Royce?
second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Royce. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce,
Yes.
Mr. Kelch,
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item K, second reading of ordinances and resolutions. Item K1, ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2022 and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson.
Move we suspend the rules and have the second and third readings of this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to suspend the rules and have the second and third reading. May I have a second? Mrs. Franzen.
I second.
Second by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion? Mr. Thompson.
I'd like to ask the auditor if he would like to make a comment on this.
Mr. Stiff, would you care to comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Usually when appropriations ordinances come to council, we try to do them all in all three readings once, because especially ordinances like this, which cause adjustments in a downward fashion to bring the appropriations into balance with what the actual end-of-year balances plus the revenues projected for this year would then equal what the certificate of estimated resources mean. Not passing it at once makes it so that our certificate is delayed. The certificate of estimated resources is the document that establishes the most that can be appropriated or budgeted to all of the funds in the city. We are obligated to file that and adjust it throughout the year as the revenues for funds either go up or down throughout the year. That must be adjusted first before any appropriations can be changed. At year end, first of all, the appropriations that we're currently under, the budget that we have at this time is based on a ordinance that was passed in December, which in turn was based on the fiscal emergency plan that was passed the prior March. The funds were also then established when we passed that budget on what the fund expectations were on the tax budget, which is the first step in that budgetary process, which happens in June. So as we got to the end of the year, as you can imagine, there are some funds that expended more than we anticipated, or that revenue was less than we anticipated. So when we close the year out and look at what those balances are, and then adjust the revenue projections for the following year, there may be some funds that on that initial tax budget last June actually had decreased revenue or increased expenditures, causing a decrease to the balance available at the end of the year. Therefore, to pass the certificate of estimated resources, we have to lower some of those funds to be what they actually have available. And then throughout the year, we adjust that certificate. So there will be some of these housekeeping type of adjustments that have to be made. Not changing the budget in the general fund, but actually looking at funds and their availability for all of our special funds, fiduciary funds, et cetera, that are available. It is not required for a appropriations ordinance to even have an emergency clause in it, because by Ohio law, any appropriations that are passed go immediately into effect and don't have a 30-day waiting period. But usually these types of changes to fund balances, as opposed to departmental budget requests, are things that really need to be passed in a timely manner so that we can file the required paperwork that's required by the county and by the state. You'll notice on this one, there is some that seem like they really go down quite a bit, like over $1 million in some of these TIF funds. However, there's two TIF funds that go down. What you're not seeing is that once the certificate is filed and adjusted and two other funds have their certificate raised, there'll be a future ordinance showing that same amount in those other TIF funds. So it's not like that money was lost. The other one that has a significant decrease is Fund 2089, which is our property investment reinvestment fund. And due to COVID and the people now working remotely from home, our earnings tax has gone down for certain companies that we had agreements to set aside some of their taxes for refund if their payroll hit significant levels and specific levels for the prior year. Because these companies have now reported to us that they're going to be having people work remotely and therefore their projected in Norwood numbers will be lower, we have to lower that amount of the fund. So different information than we had 8 months ago, and we do have to make that adjustment down. If anybody has any question about some specific areas on here, I'd like to mention probably one more that kind of jumps out, permissive tax dropped. Permissive tax is a street fund money we tend to use for matching grants for larger street projects, and it has to do with trucking permits and the usage of trucking permits as opposed to gasoline excise tax, which is in Fund 2 and 3. And that revenue through the state was down last year. Whether that revenue is going to be trending down permanently, or it was just an effect that we had looking at kind of the effects from 2020 with decreased amount of trucks on the road, hopefully that's coming back up. It may also be just from the state's collection moving a little slower, but I'm expecting that to spike back up. For right now, we do need to make estimates that that revenue is going to be more reflective of the actual revenues that we're seeing in 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Stith. Any questions for Mr. Stith? Thank you again. The motion on the floor by Mr. Thompson, a second by Mrs. Franson to suspend the rules and have the second and third reading. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir. All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Mr. Gears, may we have the second and third reading, please?
Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2022 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Braden.
Motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Mr. Kelch.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item K2, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a joint agreement with Hamilton County regarding a grant for and adopting policies and procedures for the creation, administration, and implementation of a storefront facade improvement program. Mr. Thompson.
Move we have the second, or move we suspend the rules and have the second and third readings of this ordinance?
We have a motion by Mr. Thompson to suspend the rules and have the second and third reading. Mrs. Hoover.
I second.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir. All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. May we have the second and third reading, Mr. Gears?
An ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a joint agreement with Hamilton County regarding a grant for and adopting policies and procedures for the creation, administration, and implementation of a storefront facade improvement program. An ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a joint agreement with Hamilton County regarding a grant for and adopting policies and procedures for the creation, administration, and implementation of a storefront facade improvement program.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Thompson.
Move we pass the ordinance?
Motion by Mr. Thompson to pass the ordinance. May I have a second? Mrs. Winterbauer.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir. All members present, voting aye. The ordinance passes. Moving on to item L, introductory reading of ordinances and resolutions. L1, ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with 1027 Group LLC regarding 4539 Montgomery Road. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Motion for the first reading?
We have a motion by Mrs. Winterbauer for the first reading.
Yes.
May I have a second? Mrs. Royce.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? Mr. Moore.
Mike Skelly's here, and I don't know if he wants to speak on the, because this is for the 1027 CRA. I don't know if you wanted to speak about the timing issue for this?
Good evening, councilors, your honor, to the audience. So for this particular application, with respect to the application, we have two tonight. So just very basics. They will both be looked at the improved tax abatement of 49% for 12 years. And for the first one we're talking about, it'll be just under $250,000, 225 in terms of actual improvements, minus the initial property investment. And with regards to the timing of it, I think right now, again, everyone's suffering under the delays for supply chain. I think both are hoping almost to have started earlier, at least in getting everything lined up, but we're expecting at least the next couple of months, and obviously subsequent to the approval of the agreement, that they can proceed with the actual work. So if you have any specific questions, happy to answer them, and we do have a representative tonight for the cidery here.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I think the question more specifically is this a time-sensitive ruling, like we would need to have this passed tonight for them to be able to do what they need to do, or is it okay to
I
to carry
believe,
it over a
the
couple weeks?
applicants definitely would appreciate in terms of having the rules suspended and having the full readings tonight. Obviously, that would help in terms of providing at least the endorsement. And, I believe through the discussion that we had in the committee, through the work of both staff and HCDC, a lot of the issues have been ironed out.
Okay, thank you.
So again, for me, as representing staff, I would recommend if you could provide that.
Mr. Braden?
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. So, yeah, basically if, these are projects, these are construction projects, they're gonna take, they have delays and timelines. I think that we discussed these in our committee, and I don't think there was any issues with the CRAs, so I'm okay with, if I think what they're asking is if we can rescind our motion and call it emergency, and I'm okay with that. If you guys see that fit, then I'm fine with that too. So on both of these, we have two of these on here, so.
Thank you, sir. So Mrs. Winterbauer, and you made the motion. Would you like to rescind your motion?
Yes, can I amend for all three readings tonight?
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Mrs. Royce, did you want to rescind your motion and
Yes, I'll rescind and also,
then you'll make the second?
yeah, I can second that.
Thank you. So the motion on the floor now by Mrs. Winterbauer, seconded by Mrs. Royce, is to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes,
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden? Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. The motion passes. Mr. Gears, may we have all three readings?
Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with 1027 Group LLC regarding 4539 Montgomery Road. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with 1027 Group LLC regarding 4539 Montgomery Road. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with 1027 Group LLC regarding 4539 Montgomery Road.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Braden?
Motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Mrs. Hoover?
I second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
yes,
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden? Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item L2, ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Norwood Cider Company LLC and DKRJ Holdings LLC regarding 2075 Mills Avenue. Mrs. Franson,
I move we suspend the rules and have the first, second, and third readings of this ordinance.
motion by Mrs. Franson to suspend the rules and have all three readings. May I have a second? Mrs. Royce?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Royce. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
yes,
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Mr. Gears, may we have all three readings?
Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Norwood Cider Company LLC and DKRJ Holdings LLC regarding 2075 Mills Avenue. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Norwood Cider Company LLC and DKRJ Holdings LLC regarding 2075 Mills Avenue. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Norwood Cider Company LLC and DKRJ Holdings LLC regarding 2075 Mills Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Braden.
Motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. May I have a second? Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item L3. Before I read this, it was just pointed out to me that if you could look at your ordinance, the number is wrong.
Which ordinance are you talking about? Environment court, we're talking about environment court or the water?
The fund number is wrong.
This is
correct?
the Verlin
Fund.
Court one. Right? The third one is actually the one prior to that.
Okay.
Item 3 is the ordinance for the H2O drinking water grant,
And that was the one that we got the correct.
and that's the one that we got the corrected one.
So that is correct.
That was, the substitute for that one is correct.
Then when we get to L4, okay.
L4,
All right, we're all on the same page now?
On 50/50.
Moving on to item L3, ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to accept an H2 Ohio drinking water grant from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency not to exceed $348,000 to replace consumer side lead water service lines along the Regent Avenue Road construction project within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Braden.
Motion to have all 3 readings, declare an emergency.
Motion by Mr. Braden to have all 3 readings. Mr. Kelch.
Second that.
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Any questions, Mrs. Royce? Mr. Hoover? Mrs. Hoover?
In the ordinance, mine was just missing a 0 in the first section. I don't know if that, how big of a difference
Oh,
that
that's what
makes.
you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
In the second
typo.
section too. In Section 1, it's wrong. Good catch.
Okay, yeah. I was looking right at it and I didn't see it, so. Good eye.
348,000.
Yeah. So, you need a motion to amend it.
May I have a motion to amend? Mrs. Franson?
I motion to amend as stated.
So whereas it should be $348,000. Motion by,
And in Section 2,
And then section 1,
or Section 1, excuse me.
so 348,000, yeah.
we have a motion by Mrs. Franson to amend that in section, and whereas and in section 1.
We need a second.
Mr. Braden, I need a second.
Yes.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Let's approve this and then,
Okay.
go ahead. Mr. Gears, please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes.
I need a motion to approve.
Now we
as
have,
amended.
we have a motion by Mr. Braden and a second by Mr. Kelch to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings.
As amended.
As amended.
amended.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Mr. Gears, may we have all 3 readings?
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to accept an H2 Ohio drinking water grant from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency not to exceed $348,000 to replace consumer side lead water service lines along the Regent Avenue Road construction project within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency as amended. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to accept an H2 Ohio drinking water grant from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency not to exceed $348,000 to replace consumer-side lead water service lines along the Regent Avenue Road construction project within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency as amended. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to accept an H2 Ohio drinking water grant from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency not to exceed $348,000 to replace consumer-side lead water service lines along the Regent Avenue Road construction project within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Braden?
Motion to pass the ordinance?
A motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. May I have a second? Mr. Kelch?
Second.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the ordinance passes. Mr. Stith, this is the one.
Correct. Needs to be 2002 instead of 5.
Okay. If I can draw your attention to item L4, in section 2, it says Fund 5. That should be Fund 2002. And Repair Fund 2002-5200-5720. Correct, Mr. Stith?
I would put it under 57600, not 57200 for correcting it. As this is a fund that is in fiscal emergency, and therefore the appropriations for it are fixed, and the majority of the funds are under the capital improvements key, 7600, where those monies are appropriated, and this would count as a capital project.
So look at that, make sure that's, you've got that on there correct.
Yes. It could just be 00. 5200. Yep. There. 2002, 5200, 57600.
So if I could draw your attention to that again, section 2 of L4, it is Fund 2002, and the repair fund is 2002-5200-5760. Mr. Thompson?
I would move that we amend the ordinance as stated, and I would also call attention to first paragraph in the whereas where we have the same typo with $340,000 that needs to be changed.
We have a motion by Mr. Thompson to correct the whereas to $340,000 and section 2 to the fund number that we just mentioned.
Second.
Mr. Braden?
Second.
The second. Any
Is that
discussion?
the correct amount? I think we need to verify that 340,000 is the correct amount, since that other number was so close. Is it just a zero that's being misplaced, or is that the correct amount?
According to the request from the Safety Service Director, it says the estimated total cost of $340,000.
Yep.
Okay,
That estimated 340,000 is correct.
all right.
So again, motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Braden. Any further discussion? I think we're clear. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Mr. Braden,
Now we need a motion to pass the ordinance
as amended, yes.
as amended and declaring an emergency.
No, I need a motion to.
Oh, to have all
suspend
three
the
readings
rules.
and declaring an emergency as amended,
Yes.
please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very well said. Mrs. Hoover.
I second what he said.
Thanks for lying to me.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden. Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mr. Gears, may we have all three readings?
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Varlman Avenue, Varlman Court, and Arklow Court Street Improvement Project within the City of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency as amended. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Varlman Avenue, Varlman Court, and Arklow Court Street Improvement Project within the City of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency as amended. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Varlman Avenue, Varlman Court, and Arklow Court Street Improvement Project within the City of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Braden.
Motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Mrs. Hoover.
I second.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden. Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item L5. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract with Neptune Equipment Company as lowest and best bidder for the Norwood water meter replacement and integration project, including remote read and data collection, software, hardware, and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Franzen.
I move we suspend the rules and have the first three readings and declare an emergency.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Mr. Braden?
Second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden. Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mr. Gears, may we have all three readings, please?
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract with Neptune Equipment Company as lowest and best bidder for the Norwood water meter replacement and integration project, including remote read and data collection software and hardware, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract with Neptune Equipment Company as lowest and best bidder for the Norwood water meter replacement and integration project, including remote read and data collection software and hardware, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract with Neptune Equipment Company as lowest and best bidder for the Norwood water meter replacement and integration project, including remote read and data collection software and hardware, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Braden?
Motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. May we have a second? Mr. Kelch?
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I'd like to point out that the money for this comes from money the city received from the American Recovery Act Fund, which was passed to help people recover from COVID. And I would encourage everybody at home to look up your local congressperson and see if they actually voted for this or not.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Winterbauer?
Is it okay in the whereas, I noticed that there's a comma and then period for the money? So it looks like 2040, period, 3 zeros, period, 2 zeros.
Oh, yeah, I see that one. And then whereas.
And whereas,
You see the
The first number.
the number?
does it matter? I don't know if it matters or not, I just wanna,
It's in the whereas is fine.
okay.
Thank you, Mrs.
Another
Winterbauer.
number appears
Thank you,
elsewhere.
Mr. Moore. Anyone else? Any further discussion? Please, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, yeah, I just want to mention, some of us were around the last time we switched out the meters, and, you know, some of us homeowners, when they switched out the meters, our bills went up $30 immediately, just off the bat for the meter. So I'm just hoping that when we look into this, maybe we can discuss that with the buyer, the seller, and maybe we can, you know, not do that again. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mrs. Hoover.
I actually had an interesting conversation with Mr. Powers about that very thing, and maybe ask him to come up and explain what he said about why that jump up happened with the gears getting clogged up. Was that Clint, or was that
Mr.
Mr.?
Zimmerman?
Sorry, I don't mean to put you under. But I just thought that was really interesting, because there's a mechanical reason that happened.
Hello, Clint Zimmerman, Superintendent of Public Works. Typically what happens when you see, and part of the reason why we're doing this, is because the older the meter gets, the less accurate it is over time. So if you've got a really old meter, and the vast majority of people in Norwood have the old, what we call a horn meter, which is an old Trident, fat bottom, and it comes up to a top, almost looks like a gourd, and those are incredibly inaccurate. And so what you see is not your rates are going up. You're seeing you're actually being charged for the water that you're actually using. And so what's happened over the past few years is the city of Cincinnati has systematically changed out and done preventive maintenance on the master meter pits. So they know with a fair degree of accuracy what we're taking out, all right? And they charge us appropriately. Then when we send the water through the meters in the homes, it's not being recorded accurately. So there's a large disconnect there, and that's part of the reason why we have almost 28% non-revenue water loss in the city of Norwood, is because we're not doing haven't been doing the preventative maintenance to make sure that we are accurately billing for what you use. We should be getting to a point here where we're more concerned with what you're using and charging you accurately for your usage, rather than worrying about whether or not we are keeping lockstep with Cincinnati on how they raise rates. That's the reason why you see most people will see a little bit of a difference in their water bill, because right now they're not accurately being charged for 100% of the water that they're actually using.
Any other questions for Mr. Zimmerman?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We had a motion by Mr. Braden, second by Mr. Kelch to pass the ordinance. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. The ordinance passes. Moving on to item M, administrative reports. Mayor Schneider.
Thank you, President Miracle, members of council. A lot of good work being done here, a lot more work for city employees. Clint's not leaving, is he? Yeah, Clint, come back here. So, I wanted to go through a couple of things. One is request for ordinances. What is required when the staff puts in a request for ordinance is they are supposed to fill out a sheet that requests the ordinance, and it goes to the law department, it goes to the clerk, and on that request, it should have, and each of the council members should receive this in their packet, information on why they're requesting that ordinance. So there's a summary of information on the back of that. Some of these have them, some of these do not. But if you look at the one that Noah sent in, Mr. Powers sent in as Safety Service Director, he's got an executive summary on here. And what I've asked him to do here recently is make sure if this is timely, if it is something that needs to be passed, if there's a reason, put that in the information so that council members can see that, and they can look, and either they can say, I'm not sure about that, and call Noah and we can get that clarified on a Monday or Tuesday during the day, so that when you get to the meeting, there's no question, and you even know the answer. Why is it timely? Why is this something that's important? Mr. Stith, Auditor Stith, is absolutely right. There's certain things that are housekeeping. They're sort of pass-through. Let's get this done and move on. We wouldn't want to wait, and there's nobody that's going to challenge it because a reduction in funds, a reduction in accounts. So in the future, hopefully, you'll have a little bit more information, a summary of information that's helpful to you guys as you move forward. We should all have who asked for that ordinance right there when you receive your packet, and you should be able to communicate with them directly and say, what's going on with this? We didn't talk about this any other time, so I hope that those things happen. In front of me, you will see the composting program award that we received from Hamilton County Environmental Services. So there was an idea to apply for a grant for composting bins, and we ran the program through the Hamilton, or through our Norwood Tree Board. So Donna Lake and Renee Durker did classes in the parks, and with that, you received a free composting bin. And composting isn't for everybody. I asked my mom if she wanted to go to the class. She said, I don't want to have anything to do with composting. But when I went to the class with my wife, we loved it. We met many like-minded people that were very interested in it, and it was great. And we've got an award for it. And the award was made right here in Oakley at Brazy Studios. Some of you might be familiar with that, so that'll be around City Hall. It's an exceptional piece. It's really neat looking. So Gage Bradford, who's a program specialist, wanted to be here and present it, but there were some different challenges, I think, with weather and maybe the doors being locked or something. I'm not sure. So, but really, thank you to Donna Lake and Renee Durker for running this, for keeping it going, and the board for doing that. One comment that was made here at the microphone, that we have a community plagued with senseless violence. I don't consider Norwood to be a community plagued by senseless violence, but we don't live in just this little Norwood. We live in a bigger city, a surrounding community. And if it happens in a community or anywhere around us and in Norwood, it affects us. It affects our life. So you can say, well, we don't really have that in Norwood, but we really do, because we're in a metropolitan area, and there are a lot of challenges that we face that all of our neighbors are facing. Our neighbor right across, we're only 3 square miles, so we do have to take that into account and think about all the challenges that happen in our community. It's bigger than just this little area. So Norwood is part. I want to talk a little bit about recreation. The Recreation Center is doing very well. Membership is trending positively. More and more people are getting involved there. There's a lot of great programs. The staff is very friendly, and they're doing a great job at bringing people in. And I think that the community is really taking ownership and pride in that building, in that community center. It's done nothing but good for our city so far. So there's definitely some very positive stuff going on with the Recreation Department. Mike Gabbard's got the staff going, and we're working in the right direction. Parks continue to be used. I know that we all look at it and say it's winter, but every time I go to a park, there are other people at the parks. There are still kids at the parks. Yeah, it might be a muddy day. It doesn't matter. They're at the parks. I think Clint would be the first person to say Public Works is still cleaning and working in those parks all the time. Winter's a little bit different in Cincinnati than it was when I grew up. It seemed like it snowed, and you had a long winter, and it was really cold, and you hunkered down, but it's not that way anymore. So our parks are continued, and we have some miscellaneous challenges in our parks still. We do have some, I'll just call them challenges, and they're maintenance challenges, and we have See, Click, Fix. Use them. If you see something in the park that needs to be fixed, we've put a lot of time and effort and money into these parks. If you see something that needs to be fixed, or if something got damaged or vandalized, get it into Public Works. We'll get it cleaned up. It's one of those broken glass things. If a glass is broken, somebody else will break another glass. Let's fix it quickly and then move on. And that's what we do. We have to maintain our parks. We know there are going to be those challenges. If you went past the J.B. Worth pool, which is Waterworks pool, you'll notice that the 25-year-old pool liner has been taken out of there, and they're putting a new pool liner in. They're working, when the weather's good, they're working to get that new liner in there. So that pool will open up. I feel confident it'll open up on time, no problems. We put a lot of time and effort into the pump systems also, and chemical feed systems and stuff. So that pool should be in the best shape it's been in a long time. So the outdoor pools at the Recreation Center are still not slated to be opened up next year. But the indoor pool is open right now. So what's going on in there? Well, there's swim lessons going on, there's aerobics, water aerobics going on, there's lap swimming, and then there's this thing called open swim, where you can just go with your kids and have fun swimming in the pool. And it's warm and it's a nice pool, so if you don't have a membership and have not been in there and in that pool, you really need to get one and get in there. It's a great pool. It's being utilized a lot. Swim lessons, all my kids learned how to swim there before. I told you that before. The water meter replacement program is, I'm so glad you did it in 3 readings and we're moving forward. You might recall that this was something that was going on last year and we were pushing to get it done, but we wanted to make sure there was funding in place, and we sort of held off on signing the contract. Then there were materials delays, and they said, okay, you're going to have to rebid it. We rebid it out. So now we're on track. I have been assured, and Noah probably, but I've been assured that we'll be on track, and in November we'll have all those meters replaced. We have never had, in my time with the city and being involved with, we've never had a complete replacement of water meters. We've replaced them here and there on different buildings. And as needed, of course, if a meter went bad, or if there was a construction project, they would change out the meter to get it up to speed. But we've never had a meter replacement project like this. Clint has done a great job at working and moving us forward on this. This is the city's Achilles heel. When it comes to the cities, we get more complaints from the water system, from either overpaying or underpaying, or you were averaging our bill and now our bill. So by putting this system in place, we won't have that anymore. So we can take care of a lot of those different problems. They'll be able to read. When somebody comes in and says, these readings can't be right, they'll be able to pull up on the computer and say, here's the readings, here's your consumption. Every day for the last, all that stuff will be in the system. So it's really going to be nice to have this. With that, I think I've talked at a couple of different meetings about that being a big challenge, getting all of our systems, all our policies and procedures, not just on out in the field with those meters, but then our office, the water office, and how that operates, and making sure that we're doing it right and we've got the right policies and procedures in there, billing procedures and all those things. So that's an important part. Regent Avenue, if you haven't been down Regent Avenue, it is an absolute mess. It's torn up, it's destroyed. But, when it's completed, man, it's going to be nice. So they're replacing all the water lines. Clint left, but, what I wanted to say was that $348,000 grant, remember I've talked about grants and loans, and I've talked about $348,000 grant, that came through Clint's office. That was Clint Zimmerman working to get that done. He has worked and built such a great relationship with the EPA on the water system and getting our water system tight and running well. He's really, I hate that he left, because I really would say, stand up and take a bow. $348,000 he brought in here. And in the parks, he got involved with the Lindner Foundation to get fencing. I think it was $250,000 that he got in fencing, to be installed in the parks. He's worth his weight in gold when it comes to grants. I mean, and the work that he does is just phenomenal. So, you guys approved Varleman Avenue, Varleman Court, and Arklow as the streets that'll be going on. So Regent's going on right now. We continue our street program. I know the streets are in tough shape right now. Think about our streets. This isn't Florida. We just had a heck of a snow event with all the ice. We had extra salt going down on them. Yes, it opened up a lot of potholes, but Public Works is on it. They'll get the potholes. They'll get the streets closed back up. If you see one, the best thing to do, especially if you see a big one, one of those that are going to break a rim, call it in. Call Public Works, get on See Click Fix, get on your app on your phone and send that in real quick, and we'll get out there and take care of it. But there's a lot of them right now. I guarantee you they're going through a lot of a patch getting that stuff back in shape. The other thing I wanted to talk about is Norwood rental venues. There's a lot of places for family parties, for family reunions, for birthday parties, for graduations. Contact the recreation department. The office staff there can get you set up with rentals in the parks. I know that Northwoods Park is always a heavily rented park. It seems like every weekend, 2 times a weekend there, or 3, there's something going on there. If you're a City of Norwood resident and you're watching this and you want to get something going on, you better contact them soon. But they also have rental inside at the recreation center. They have rental spaces at the community center, and they have rental spaces over at the Worth Pool. What's called the J.B. Worth Room is another rental. So Norwood has a lot. don't forget, there's all sorts of churches around the city of Norwood, and churches, a lot of churches will rent out spots for you to have a party, have something, so consider that. And then the Ventura Event Center is right here on the corner at Sherman and Montgomery, and that's a beautiful venue for weddings and all sorts of other events that are going on there. So don't forget to utilize those resources. We have a meeting tomorrow with the staff. Both Noah and Mike Skelly, our Community Development Director, will be there with the TIF and CRA administration, because it's the business of the city continues to go on and on and on. So we'll have in there bond counsel, which is from Frost, Brown, and Todd, which is Pat Woodside, and Bradley Payne Advisors. There will be a person in on that. But trying to keep these all going in the right direction is a challenge. And then, let's see, two other things. Elm Avenue before Chris Calshansky. Yes, we're still moving forward with Elm Avenue. With the big storm coming through on Monday, Clint and I had a discussion during the day about, man, we've got major rainfall coming through. Should we be looking at the catch basins and making sure that everything we can do is taken care of right now? And we are, and we're moving forward with that. And then Montgomery Road improvements. I hope to have some preliminary stuff on Montgomery Road improvements to bring the Streets and Infrastructure Committee in the next month or so to talk about what we're going to. That's a pretty far out project, 2024, but there's a lot that needs to be done. So those are important. Privileged to be asked to give remarks prior to the Houday Bengals rally that was held. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. And then also privileged to be asked to attend the Gems of the Community Award ceremony that's being put on by Norwood Together. That's coming up this week. So the business of the city is moving. I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Any questions or comments for Mayor Schneider? Mrs. Franzen?
I just had one quick comment as regards to the water meters. This is more for information for homeowners. So they will be replaced for all of the single-family homes, but any meters that are more than an inch in diameter, that is the responsibility of the property owner. So that's mostly apartment buildings and buildings that are businesses. Clint just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that. That's not a new thing. That's standard business practice.
Thank you, Mrs. Franzen. Anyone else? Thank you, Mayor Schneider.
Thank you.
Moving on to item N, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business this evening to discuss? Anyone? No? Then we'll move on to new business. Any new business this evening? Mrs. Hoover?
Sorry, he had me on this list. Thank you,
Ladies
Mr.
first.
Thank you, Mr. President. I need to schedule a new housing meeting. We didn't have enough folks present at the last gathering, so it was not an official meeting. And so there's some items in there, specifically the housing action plan. And also, I was contacted by a woman in the community who is aware that there are some people experiencing homelessness who have been utilizing the Quality Inn for shelter. So I know that Mr. Powers is aware of it, and they're doing some things on their end. I also reached out to Kevin Flynn, who is the Executive Director of Strategies to End Homelessness, because they have some really good protocols in place on how to do that in a very thoughtful, respectful, and sustainable manner. So would like to have a meeting as soon as possible so we can get those things in the committee. So I was going to ask the folks on the committee if Thursday, March the 3rd would work. So that would be, let me see, sorry, Mr. Breeden and Mrs. Winterbauer and Miss Alexis. Yes. Would that day work for you guys?
It'd be at 7 o'clock.
Thursday the 3rd, 7 o'clock? Would 7 o'clock work?
That's fine.
Yeah,
So
that works.
7 PM on Thursday the 3rd.
Council chambers.
And we would do that here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Mr. Thompson?
I'd like to call a Finance Committee meeting for next Tuesday, March the 1st at 6:30.
Here. Council
Here,
chambers.
yeah, here, sorry.
What time?
6:30.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I just want to comment on a couple things, just the amount of work and renovations going on around the city here. I've been paying attention for quite some time, and if you have been, like I have been, you realize the amount of work and things that are happening in the city, and that's due to this administration and the hard work that Mr. Powers and these others, that he has collaborated and put these people together. Specifically, former YMCA, Norwood Rec Center, I just wanted to share my experience. I rented a room Sunday for a baby shower for my son, and the facilities are absolutely gorgeous. I grew up in that building. I just know that, that the work that's being done is absolutely beautiful. And I'm so proud of Norwood and the administration for everything that's happening. And from the baby shower at 3 o'clock, we rented a room in the rec center. And then at 8 o'clock, my basketball team played in an adult basketball league at the former YMCA Norwood Rec Center. And it was absolutely a great time. Our team played against the Norwood Fire Department. And it was a great time. I just want to just encourage our neighbors and our community to take advantage of this. It is wonderful. So I'm not gonna say.
We're not talking about it.
Well.
All I'm saying is the police department's next. So anyway, I'm proud of you, Mr. Schneider. I've seen your work, and it is phenomenal. So great job for the administration, and thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Anyone else? Mrs. Franzen?
This is more just a note to interested citizens. So there is a workshop going on next Thursday at 6:30 at the Norwood Rec Department that is going to be talking about how Ohio is redesigning the rest areas using native plants, some tools for green infrastructure from OKI, and a Q&A for any Norwood citizens. This is being put on through some very great people that are involved with Ohio Parks and Dana Bowl of Keep Norwood Cool. Sent this information to me to share at council. So wanted to do that. If you're interested in native plants and learning more about green infrastructure, this would be a good thing to go to. 6:30 Thursday, March 3rd at the Norwood Recreation Center.
Thank you, Mrs. Franzen. Anyone else? I would like to call a committee of the whole prior to our next meeting on March the 8th, if we could meet here at 6:30. And I'll send out the agenda. I have one item I'd like to discuss, a report on accounting methods. And I shared with the new members on your desk, gave you a copy in my notes and highlights on there. Anyone else? Okay, moving on, we will go on to communications. Item P1, letter from Noaa Powers, Safety Service Director, regarding water rates. Mr. Gears.
Dear President and members of Norwood City Council, I have enclosed a copy of the letter from the City of Cincinnati raising the water meter rates to the City of Norwood by 3.75%. Ordinance 20-1992 states the Director of Public Service shall levy and assess charges in a sufficient amount to pay the current operating expenses and costs of permanent improvements to the city waterworks or water system on an annual basis. The Director of Public Service shall notify council in written form of every increase in water charges or assessments at least 30 days prior to the implementation of the same. With regard to the above, the City of Norwood water rates will be increased by 4%. We are working diligently to continue improving our water service throughout the city, and keeping customer rates in line with purchasing rates is of the utmost importance. Sincerely, Noaa Powers, Safety Service Director.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Thompson.
Move we receive and file the letter.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to receive and file the letter. May I have a second? Mrs. Winbauer.
Second to file.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, motion passes. Moving on to item P2, Division of Liquor Control regarding new license for La Economica LLC. Mr. Gears.
Dear local legislative authority official, please find and close the legislative notice that is being sent to you regarding the applied for liquor permit as captioned on the notice. You must, within 30 days from the mailed date listed on the notice under the barcode, notify the division whether you object and want a hearing or ask for your one-time only 30-day extension. Any requests for a one-time 30-day extension will be reviewed by the division upon timely receipt. If granted, your additional 30 days runs the expiration of the original 30-day period. To be considered timely, your above response must be faxed, emailed, or mailed to the division no later than the postmark deadline, the date given on the form. To speed up processing times and reduce paper, the division respectfully asks that you either fax or email your response. Please send your response to fax 614-644-3166, email liquor licensing mail unit at com.state.oh.us, mail Ohio Division of Liquor Control, Attention Licensing Unit 6606 Tussing Road, P.O. Box 4005, Reynoldsburg, Ohio 43068-9005. Please note that the division is no longer sending ownership information with this legislative notice. If you want to know who owns the applied for permit, you can find that information in two ways. Go to https://www.comapps.ohio.gov/liqr/apps/permit lookup /permit holder ownership.aspx and enter the permit number listed on the legislative notice, or contact your police department or your county sheriff if you are a township fiscal officer or county clerk. The division sends the applicable law enforcement agency the pertinent ownership information when it notifies them of the permit application. Thank you in advance for your cooperation, Division Licensing Section.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Thompson.
Move we receive and file and waive the request for hearing for this liquor permit.
Motion by Mr. Thompson. May I have a second? Mr. Braden?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Mrs. Hoover?
I just wanted to share that I did stop in there this evening, just because I'd never been in it, and it's a lovely, lovely place. And they have not only some fresh produce, but lots of specific ethnic foods and a deli counter. And it's really bright, lovely store, very welcoming, and I'm really excited for what they can make it much bigger on the inside than it looks on the outside. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Anyone else? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, motion passes. Moving on to adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Braden?
Before I motion to adjourn, can I jump out of order here? Can I make a comment? I want to, so it's just informative here. We've made several committee meetings, and I just want to, so we have sunshine laws regarding committee meetings, and I didn't hear any reasons for the, so normally we have, so if you want to talk about something, I just want to be informative here. If you want to talk about something in your committee meeting, we have to actually label that and put that as an agenda. So I didn't hear any agendas tonight, so I just want to make sure that we're clear that we need agendas, and if we're going to talk about it at the committees, it needs to be on the agenda. So that's all, that's just.
And I think they're emailing that information to
Correct.
Mr. Gears, and then he sends that out to the appropriate sunshine list. Go ahead.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Thompson?
Second that.
Second, please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. We are adjourned.